Josh Hader has found a landing spot. And I guess in terms of actual dollars allocated without deferrals, he's like the highest paid reliever in baseball history, which isn't overly surprising. We've been talking about this. He's getting 19 a year for 5 years. That's a huge commitment. If you look at all-time deals for closers and relievers, 5 years, $95 million is a lot of money. It's not surprising he didn't return to San Diego. That really wasn't in discussion the last couple of months. Houston, I think it's a good landing spot because, again, closers are more valued for teams that are hoping to make deep runs in the postseason. Here is what I would say about Hader's time in San Diego. And maybe this is controversial, maybe it isn't. I don't know if you and I agree on this or not. There was a lot of, there were a lot of discussion about Hader and his usage and his availability and not going more than 3 outs in a save. But I will say this. He has one of the moments that coincides with one of the better moments in recent franchise history, which is what he did against the Dodgers in the NLDS, including being on the mound when they won the series in Game 4 at Petco Park. So listen, it wasn't perfect. Maybe it wasn't a perfect fit for San Diego, Josh Hader, but Jim, the numbers stack up, and he was on the mound for some of the most important games in the last 20 years for the franchise. So I understand that he's leaving. I understand he's not liked by everyone, but I do appreciate what he did specifically in the postseason in 2022. That's what I would say. It's like, I'm not going to kick him on the way out and be like, terrible fit, I'm glad he's gone, because I think he meant more than that, even though it wasn't ideal. I recognize that.
Okay.
You disagree? Because we didn't talk about this.
No.
Yep.
I know. And I view Josh Hader differently.
Okay. I want to hear what
I view him as probably one of the most dominant closers in the game. Yes, I agree there. But I also view as there was a lot left in the tank. In my eyes, in my opinion.
That's fine. I would agree.
I think that you look at the times that you wish he would have been out there and he wasn't. And like there was a lot of that happening and he wasn't. For whatever reasons, we can hash those over. Did not want to pitch more than 3 outs, didn't want to pitch multiple innings, didn't want to pitch on 3 straight days in a row. There's a lot of that there, and I think it definitely soured a lot with the fan base towards the end, and at the very end when he was talking about what it was, just were we in the playoff race?
That was a poor decision. I agree with you.
And for whatever you want to say about his postseason in 2022, which the Dodgers series, he was fantastic. And that whole postseason, he was literally unhittable. I think he went the entire postseason without allowing a single run. Am I correct?
Yeah, he went, Jim, in the 2022 postseason, he went 5 1/3 innings, 1 hit.
Yeah,
no runs.
He was, and how many strikeouts?
He had 10 strikeouts in 5 1/3 innings.
So he was literally unhittable.
Yep.
And you look at that postseason run, and I still feel the same way. There was a lot left on the table.
Was that on him, the 2022 postseason? You're talking about the Phillies series now, right?
Yeah.
Because he appeared 3 times in 4 games against the Dodgers, and they won 3 games. But in the Phillies series, I guess this is one of those, like, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop conversations? Do we ever really know what happened in, like, Game 5, for example, when Robert Suarez was on the mound? And maybe it was completely on Josh Hader. And they had, orchestrated a plan where he wasn't going more than 4 outs. Were there 5 outs remaining in that game? Did Bryce Harper hit a home run with 1 out in the 8th inning?
Yeah, there's 5 outs.
Okay, so there were 5 outs. Was the difference between Hader being on the mound or not being on the mound 1 out? Probably, right?
He wasn't even warming up, I think.
Okay.
He may have been warming up at the time, but I don't think he was up in the bullpen at that moment. We'll never know.
Yeah, we'll never truly know. But I could see that. I could see him saying, like, I'm not going 2 innings in any circumstance, including Game 5 of, season on the line.
And if that was the case. And if you want to blame Bob Melvin there, like, you can blame Bob Melvin if you want. We were definitely very critical of Bob Melvin at that moment in time after Game 5 for not having Josh Hader out there in the most important moment of your entire season versus the best hitter on their team. The matchup was there. The timing
in the world. At the time, the guy was unbelievable. Was he not?
Yeah, he hit a pitch that probably nobody hits.
Another good point.
At all.
And maybe he does the same thing against Hader. We have no clue.
But we know that Josh Hader at that moment
was unhittable.
Was your best pitcher.
Yeah.
Not Robert Suarez, even though Robert Suarez was lights out that year. But guess what? Josh Hader was your best pitcher.
No, I agree with you.
And so for me, that's how I view Josh Hader's time here in San Diego. And then last year definitely made it very sour, left a very sour taste in your mouth because of how much they struggled in extra inning games, in 1-run games. And they were, I guess you could say they were close to the end, even though to me it was a fake run. Like it was a The 82 wins didn't really just like, when the Cowboys game versus the Packers this past
score
weekend.
late touchdowns. Give me a break.
The end score made it look way better than it was.
You're right.
48-32. You're thinking to yourself,
no,
maybe it was close. They were blown out.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel about the Padres 2023 season. They won 82 games, but it was not a team that was even close to competing for a playoff spot or even a World Series.
With all the benefit of hindsight, and we talked about it at the time. I mean, we were proponents of them trading away Josh Hader and Blake Snell last July. Now, I understand the reasons as to not do, and I'm not going to be crazy critical. I haven't been of AJ Preller for not doing it or the organization. There were dynamics at play. There's a marketing element. They were still in it at the end of July. They had just swept the Texas Rangers, who would later win the World Series. But you look back on Josh Hader, and you're right. It was a sour ending. And he did play a critical role despite posting a 1 ERA. And the Padres were historically bad in one-run games.
Mm-hmm.
You almost, again, it's all hindsight. You kind of wish they could cut their losses there because it would have been a real return. There would have been a contender looking for a guy with a 1 ERA to try to win a World Series. And I don't know what they would have gotten. And I understand not moving him in the moment. But the last 2 months, he barely pitched in August. You remember that? Because they were so bad.
Yeah.
He barely pitched in August. He did pitch a lot in September, but that's when he wasn't even talking about throwing 3 consecutive days because he basically said, well, we're not really in it. The final week of the season.
Yeah. It's a lot of what ifs with Josh Hader. Now he's going to make a bunch of money now. $95 million for 5 years. That's the highest AAV or is it AAV or is it highest overall salary?
Most guaranteed money without deferrals in the history of baseball for a reliever.
I know Diaz got over 100.
He did, but I guess there's a deferral element to it or a non-guarantee element to a portion of it.
Well, anyway,
it's huge money.
Even with what he did last year and didn't do last year, and the rumor, not the rumor, but the label of guy won't pitch more than 3 outs.
Mm-hmm.
Guy won't pitch 3 days in a row. That label on him, he still got paid. So for whatever you want to say about Josh Hader,
he played his cards right.
He got the money and he got the deal. He may have gotten more money if he exerted himself more and went out there. But how much more exactly? Maybe 1 year more,
or maybe 1 million more per year, which again is a lot of money.
An extra 10 million.
When you're making 19 million a year, it's not a lot of money because what he did do is he got to free agency healthy.
Yeah, and did you see that snippet out from I forget who it was saying that Josh Hader's the healthiest he's ever been or the healthiest medicals ever.
No, who said that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I saw it somewhere. Okay. I think it was either Nightingale or it was.
Were they poking fun because of his lack of usage?
They were like, agent told. I'm sure an agent told this person or whoever reported it that, dude, his medicals are amazing, and they put it out there. So, like you said, he played his cards right. He did everything for himself to get this money, but that's the biggest problem. Is I felt like Josh Hader was more a me guy
than a team guy.
By
the way, if I'm being honest, I don't think he was the only guy in the clubhouse with those feelings in 2023 when things weren't going well. And the truth is with Hader, like I'm trying to compare him to another sport, his usage, to your point, because he felt slighted by his usage in Milwaukee and some of the arbitration elements of that, his innings just have gone down throughout it. He was an 80 inning guy at one point. He was a 70 inning guy at one point. The last 2 years, 50 innings, followed by 56 innings, which is reasonable, but it's low. It's on the lower side. Now that he signed a 5-year deal that guarantees him $95 million, maybe he's willing to ramp it up a little bit more and go to 65 innings or 70 innings. But there's no scenario where if I'm AJ Preller, I would have touched this guy with a 10-foot pole to return. So I understand that. But with two things can be true. I don't want him for 5 years, 95, but I do recognize his significance in 2022. And I give Niebla credit for what he did with him in August when things were bad.
He fixed him.
But Hader, I don't know if they beat the Dodgers in the series without Josh Hader. Maybe they do, maybe they don't.
No, they probably don't.
I don't know. Maybe they blow one of those games with someone else.
No, they don't beat the Dodgers. I can probably say that pretty confidently right there.
So he played a big role in his year and a half here.
But like I said, we'll never know if they could have beaten. I mean, they didn't use Josh Hader one time in Philadelphia.
They didn't use him one time in those 3 games. They used him once in San Diego, game 2. And then, but again, I don't know how much of that is solely on Hader. And maybe it's all, or maybe it's none.
Well, I think there is got to be at least some.
Okay.
Because when you are coming into your role and you're letting everybody know, like, I'm not going to pitch more than 3 outs. And guess what? If I pitch more than 3 outs, it has to be 4 max. Like 4 is the max number, which I did think he pitched 4 in that Dodger series.
He did.
So 5 was too much. And that was the reason why that it was explained, or at least
maybe
the whole thought bubble about it was the reason why Josh Hader was not out there to face Bryce Harper, because there was 5 outs instead of 4. And if there was 4 outs, it probably is a different story. Maybe it's different. I don't know. We'll never know. But it's 5 outs, so there's no chance he's out there. And look, to me, while we're rehashing this, because Josh Hader just signed a deal with the Astros today, so it's fine to go down memory lane.
Yep.
It was never to me about 5 outs. It never was about that. It was about the situation and the hitter. If Josh Hader gets out of that inning, who says that the Padres don't tack on 3 or 4 runs in the top of the 9th? And then guess what? You don't have to use Josh Hader. And so then you can go somewhere else. Or you can use Josh Hader for maybe an out or 2, and then you bring in somebody else. So it never was to me about, well, if you put him in, does he have to go 5 outs? No, he never had to go 5 outs. It was about the situation and the batter. And to me, it was about getting Bryce Harper out of the game, not that, he had to go 5 outs if he was out there.
Okay, that's fair. I'll push back on that, and here's why. When a closer comes into a game, regardless of circumstance, outs remaining, if you're in a safe spot, you're planning to end the game with him on the mound. Nobody brings on Josh Hader in that spot and says, well, maybe we'll tack on a couple of runs. I mean, you are either winning or losing the game.
No,
that's the thought process there. Now, you're right. I mean, maybe he works 25 pitches to get out of that spot, and then he can't go another 35 pitches or 25 pitches if things get rough in the 9th inning. But you call upon him with 1 out in the 8th inning to win the game, not to just get Bryce Harper, in my opinion, in that spot. I would have, again, it makes everyone with the benefit of hindsight is turning to Josh Hader there. So maybe there was a reason they didn't. And maybe it was solely because of Josh Hader's desires not to throw more than 3 or 4 outs.
Or he gets out of the 8th inning on 3 pitches.
He could have. We'll never know.
And we never will know.
Or he allows the exact same home run that Bryce Harper hit.
But then I think you'd feel okay with it then, right?
Agreed. Because when you go down, it's like, what else do you do? I've always said that with Melvin. You've heard me say it a million times. If you lose with your closer on the mound in the 9th inning, manager did his job. He got it to the closer, and the closer didn't do his job. And by the way, that happens. Right. None of them are perfect.
Yeah. So that's the, I guess, legacy of Josh Hader here in a Padres uniform. For me, at least, is a giant what if. And in the end, it turned out, I feel like the perception was more of a me guy than a team guy, just because of the quotes and the comments and the lack of pitching more than 3 outs. And, he got what he wanted, which was the biggest deal possible. And he played his cards perfectly for himself.
So okay. It's interesting you say that. And the reason I say, and I don't know, maybe we should put a poll here on YouTube or put it on social media. Like, do you remember Hader more for, like, I'm with you, being more of a me guy, or for being on the mound when the Padres beat the quote unquote mighty Dodgers in the NLDS? And I get it. It still was somewhat unfulfilling. They didn't win the NLCS. They didn't get to a World Series. They didn't win a World Series. But it's like, does that moment stand alone unto itself that outweighs everything else? And maybe it doesn't. It's weird. I feel like Padres fans you would think beating the Dodgers at home with Josh Hader on the mound is something that would live like in Padres history for forever. And that would make Josh Hader one of these well-liked figures in the history of the organization. Wouldn't you kind of think that? Like, in the moment, wow, Hader on the mound. They beat the Dodgers. But a year later?
Well, it all turns when you, as a fan, feel like this guy is about me and not the team first.
And you're saying that maybe started as soon as the Phillies series? Like, was that our perception in the offseason? Like, had we already turned a little bit on Hader based on what had happened in the Phillies series? Or did this really play out in 2020?
Was Game 5. I think a lot of people were on Melvin more than Hader. But then with everything that played out in 2023 with Josh Hader, you start saying, well, Melvin didn't do anything because he knew Josh Hader wasn't going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the marching orders. Like, hey, coach, I'm not going to pitch more than 3 outs.
Yeah, coach.
And you have,
we're up a couple points.
And you have so many different variables there. Agent, the player, everything, right? It's not just.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a lot of variables here.
Yeah,
free agency
from the front office,
free agency, final deal, year of his deal.
Yep.
And then you can also go to the thing that we really haven't talked about here is the fumbling of not trading Josh Hader at the deadline.
Well, we did just talk about it, but yeah, we could talk about it more.
Oh, I meant just like AJ at the deadline. It was a false hope. And you had Hader on your team who would have been a guy that could have gotten you something in return.
Yeah.
And you didn't. You held on to him and you dimmick the postseason. Same thing with Blake Snell whenever he signs. And now you're looking at this year's team with so many holes on the roster right now that maybe you could have filled one of those holes by trading Josh Hader last August.
It's beyond a maybe. Yeah, if you know how to have a scouting department and make an effective trade, you're not just making some random trade. You were getting something in return for Josh Hader, and you're getting even more in return, you would think, for Blake Snell. And again, I think there's two sides to that coin. I understand holding on to them in the moment. You're drawing 3 million fans. You're not fully out of it, although the writing was on the wall. The team just never performed until it was well too late. So, yeah, today it's easy to say they should have moved them, and we said it in real time as well. And you look at the holes, and it's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of holes here, and we're still scratching our head. They're reporting to spring training pitchers and catchers in 23 days, and there's still a lot of holes, and nobody really knows how they're going to fill those holes. And
you don't think that they could have filled these holes by trading Blake Snell at the deadline last year?
They absolutely could have.
Or Josh Hader?
Of course they could have.
But you wanted to keep Blake Snell because he's doing a Cy Young season, and you wanted to keep Josh Hader because you.
I think the reason they kept it, I think it was twofold. I think it was a little bit of false hope, like believing in it. Yeah, I think because they were. I mean, it's not like, Jim, they weren't 11 games out of a playoff spot.
They swept the Rangers, the eventual World Series winners that weekend, right before the deadline.
And they're 3 games out, I bet. 2. I mean, there was nothing.
They weren't 2 out.
From the wild card?
They were 2 out of the wild card?
I'm saying it wasn't far. They weren't more than 4 games out at that moment.
They were still under 500.
But there's all these teams that made the postseason. This wasn't a team that was 8-9 games out of a playoff spot most of the year, was it?
No. I'm not saying they were like 8-9 games out of a playoff spot, but I don't think they were like 1 or 2. I could be wrong, but it didn't feel like that at the time.
Well, I'm thinking it was 3 or 4.
Okay, maybe 3 or 4.
But maybe you're right. Maybe it was 5.
But what did we say all leading up to the deadline? Is that this team is what it is,
right? Exactly.
And 3 games is not going to change what this team really is,
right?
And that's what that AJ Preller in the front office did. They decided to look at the last 3 games before the deadline and decide like that's who our team is, instead of actually looking at the first 2.5 months of the season and realizing no, that's the team you guys really are. And it showed in August when it completely backfired on them by not trading Hader and Snell.
Well, look at it this way. After they swept Texas, they were 2 games under 500, 8 games out in the division.
What about the wild card?
I don't have it because that's not available to me on Baseball Reference that readily. But like, there is no way on that day they were more than 4 games out of a playoff spot. 4 games at 52 and 54? I don't think so. If they were 8 games out in the division, and unless I'm missing something.
And then you could say, well, not bad luck, but just the timing of it was horrible because the deadline happened the day after Musgrove goes in the IL. And you're like, what?
And also, you could argue, to your point, and I'm with you, one series shouldn't have dictated decisions, but it probably did. If you're swept in that series, you're 49 and 57, but you sweep the series and you're 52 and 54. And that probably changed the course of, what they decided to do at the deadline.